We'll get started in just a few minutes. We're going to wait and let everyone get into the meeting, and then we will get started. Looking at the number. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started just in an effort to keep everything on time. My name is Catherine Warren. I am the Executive Director of the National PKU Alliance. We are excited to have all of you with us today. It is our second of our PK University webinar series, and we are super excited to feature our friends with the Kith Collective, who have been our partners in putting together our externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. And we're excited to hear more about, the importance of the PFDD meetings and how each of you can be involved in our PFDD, which is just 1 month from today on May 8th. And before we get started, just wanted to, clarify. So a patient-focused drug development meeting is done in conjunction. We've worked with the FDA over the past year to plan this meeting, but ours is an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. So, whatever happens in this next month, our meeting is going forward, and, the end result of the PFDD is our Voice of the Patient report. And that will be a really important document that will help direct not only the FDA, but life science companies as well. So, this meeting is so important and we appreciate your interest. And with that, I will hand it over to the Kith team.
Thank you, Catherine. And it's great to be with everyone today, and nice to see some familiar names among the participants. And we're really excited about this opportunity to sort of get all of you and the PKU community ready for this really important and unique opportunity we have a month from today. So my name is Kim McCleary, and this is my team, Samantha Mayberry and Lauren Kenny, and we're going to take turns sort of introducing the topic of patient-focused drug development, and then what we have coming a month from now. I'll say that each of us are really passionate about bringing patient and caregiver perspectives and incorporating those perspectives across the full life cycle of healthcare, from early stage research into the development of new therapies and devices that can be really transformative for patient lives, and then making sure that that innovation translates into real opportunities when you are sitting with your doctor in the clinic examining room. And so we're really thrilled to be working with NPKUA and the broader PKU community to make sure your voices and your experiences have a real centerpiece and impact on the way that PKU is viewed, researched, and treated. So this is just the start of that conversation. And as Catherine said, we have the meeting coming up a month from now, and then the Voice of the Patient report that can be a really impactful sort of evergreen resource for a lot of different purposes that you may find in the coming years. So with that, I will just give you a kind of high-level overview of the agenda, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sam. So we want to introduce first this whole concept of patient-focused drug development, and then be more specific about the TruePKU EL-PFDD meeting. And I hope that EL-PFDD will roll off your tongues by the end of this hour, and you'll be really feeling very ready and equipped for the opportunity we have next month. And we're happy to save some time for your questions and to make sure we address any questions or concerns you may have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sam.
Thanks so much, Kim. As Kim mentioned, I'm going to start by giving just a little bit of background as to what PFDD is, because like so many things, it's an acronym that not everyone uses on the daily, like we do. Um, PFDD stands for Patient Focused Drug Development. And I know it seems like that should really be common sense, that medicine development should have always been focused on patients. But in reality, that's not how things started. Traditionally, new treatments and medicines were developed first with the perspectives of scientists or doctors kind of at the forefront. Um, so PFDD kind of seeks to change that to make sure that new treatments for diseases like PKU first consider what matters most to the people living with or caring for someone with PKU. Um, so over the past couple decades, this has been a shift, and I'll kind of get to that history in just a minute. But first, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the drug development process more broadly. Some of you may have seen this type of image before at a NPKUA conference or something like that. So forgive me if this is kind of old hat for you. Um, so I'll just try and go through it as quickly as I can. Uh, okay, starting on, Lauren, if you could kind of, I'll let you know when to pull those up. If you could go back one. Thanks. Okay, so starting all the way on the left, we have the orange section. That is the kind of phase of research that's known as foundational research, that often takes place at universities, kind of in a lab setting. It's called foundational research because it really creates a foundation for future science, that will directly involve patient participants. So at that stage, there might be thousands of ideas for a new medication. As we kind of move along in this process, we get to that purpley magenta section, where there are three different phases of clinical trials. This might be a little bit more familiar to some of you who have experience participating in clinical trials, certainly. But this is where a life science company usually picks up some of that research, that foundational research, um, and we'll begin kind of doing these clinical trials, doing testing out just a handful of potential new medicines, and go through this very rigorous process of determining the safety of them and the efficacy of those medicines through the phases. Um, the clinical trials might include hundreds of participants, but sometimes in rare diseases like PKU, they can be smaller as well. So then that takes us to the green section. That's where there's one potential new medicine that undergoes a final review by a regulatory agency, which in the US would be the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. As Catherine was mentioning, these meetings were tied to FDA, and we'll talk a bit more about that, although this meeting is an NPKUA meeting. So at this phase, the FDA looks at all the evidence generated over the course of this process. They look to determine if the benefit of that medicine will outweigh any risks. They're also looking to make sure that there's enough evidence that the medicine is both safe and effective. So then if it's approved, so shown to be safe and effective, and the benefits outweigh the risks, that medicine can then be manufactured, and then marketed to the approved population. So that's kind of a very simple run through of this process. And I just start by sharing it because it highlights why PFDD is so important to the researchers at the beginning, to life science companies, and to the regulators at the end. This process takes many years. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. And also it takes a lot of time from people participating in clinical trials too. And if a medicine goes through this whole process, but it's not aligned with what a patient, with what matters most to a patient or to families, that would be a major miss for all the people who were involved along the way. Um, so patient-focused drug development, PFDD, is really critical to ensuring that new medicines don't miss the mark. Okay, we can go ahead and click now. Thank you. Uh, so before PFDD, there were very limited ways that this process could kind of connect directly with the communities that the medicine was seeking to help. Um, First, communities could maybe raise money for research and donate that money that was raised through walks or other fundraising events to the academic institution, which is a very important part of this whole process, but doesn't really allow the patients and family members to really say anything or weigh in about the research topics. Um, then when you get to the clinical trial phase, if we could click again, sometimes the life science companies that sponsor research would enlist patient groups like NPKUA to help them recruit for clinical trials. But again, that wasn't really asking patients what matters to them, and if the drug or medicine being studied, would be beneficial in some way. So it was reacting versus kind of designing things with patients in mind. And then finally, FDA had, before this whole PFDD movement, FDA had a process for one single person to sit in on a committee at the very end of the whole process and provide their perspectives, which would be a really difficult task for that single person to represent an entire patient community, no matter how large. But most patient communities have very different experiences, and we know that's definitely true in PKU. So, um, okay. So I think that takes us to, yes, I wanted to just give a little bit of background on the FDA itself, because again, this is not a topic that everybody thinks about all day, every day. So when we talk about the FDA, there are a few different groups within the FDA that are really kind of critical to the PKU community, and I just want to mention them. Um, so if we could click once more, some of you may know that the FDA is divided into different centers. And for PKU, more than one of those centers has a real interest in new medicines or technologies or other products like medical nutrition. So anytime we do talk about FDA today, we're thinking about kind of these different areas. And as you can see in the pink row, kind of why each of these four key centers is important to the PKU community. So we have the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. We have the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, and then the Human Foods Program all really have a vested interest in better understanding what matters most to PKU patients and their family members. Another piece of background I mentioned, I wanted to give just a little bit of history on PFDD that kind of takes us to where we are today. So just in the past couple of decades, starting in really launching in 2012, I guess, after a lot of advocacy work, the FDA committed to what they call their PFDD initiative. The initiative started with FDA committing to host a series of meetings where they would hear directly from patients or family members. So they first said that they would host 20 meetings, and this was the FDA running them, but they found them so valuable that they actually added on 4 more. So they committed to hosting 24 meetings as part of the initiative they were running. And one of the earliest of these meetings actually included PKU, so some of you may have been aware of it at the time. In 2014, FDA hosted a meeting on inborn errors of metabolism. PKU was included in that meeting, and several people affected by PKU as patients or caregivers participated and spoke during that meeting. Um, During that time, the FDA found these meetings so informative that not only did they up their original commitment on the number of meetings, they also realized that they could never cover all the different all the different disease areas. That would be tens of thousands of meetings. Um, and so they also realized that this wasn't only beneficial to them as folks sitting at FDA, but also really valuable to life science companies, to researchers, and to others in the patient community who maybe hadn't known this about their disease or hadn't had the chance to meet others with their disease. So it could be kind of a real community event. Um, so with that, if we could click, the FDA expanded their PFDD initiative and created the opportunity for patient advocacy organizations like NPKUA to host what are called externally led PFDD meetings, EL-PFDD meetings, in parallel to the FDA initiative. And if we could click one more time, that's where TruePKU comes in. And there have been over 115 now of these kind of expanded EL-PFDD meetings to date. So while PKU was involved back in that 2014 meeting, I do want to mention it was kind of in the context of other inborn errors of metabolism and really didn't get that much time to be dedicated to it. And so NPKUA recognized this great opportunity to give a fuller picture of PKU and also how much things have changed since 2014 with new treatment options available to patients. So NPKUA submitted a letter, it's called a letter of intent to the FDA to host the TruePKU meeting. And that kind of brings us more to where we are today. Just one last background note before I turn things over back to my colleague Kim. This isn't just something that's happening in the US and not just happening at the FDA. It's really a global movement. PFDD and the types of information shared at PFDD meetings is sought after by really large and important and influential organizations around the world in the hopes that all health systems can be more patient-centered. So this slide is just meant to show kind of this is happening all over the place with a lot of really important institutions. And with that, I will turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Sam, and thanks for such a great overview. And you may have noticed Sam getting a little breathless. She is 9 months pregnant, so I applaud her for being able to get all that out with
Thanks.
somebody weighing on her ribs as she did that. Very impressive. Great. So with that sort of background, we thought it would be helpful to share, like, what's the point? Sam did a great job explaining why these meetings matter. I've had the opportunity to participate from the very beginning in 2013 when they were first started. And it's really been impressive to see just the shift that's occurred over the last 10 years. And we've borrowed some of FDA's own slides because we can tell you what they, found, but I think it's more impactful for you to see it in their own words. So as Sam said, they weren't really sure when they started this whole PFDD initiative. It was kind of not forced on them, but, it was a lot of advocacy that went into creating this program. And I think they were a little skeptical that they would not maybe hear anything different than the key opinion leader physicians who were coming in to talk to them, or the people in the companies that spent, years developing a new medicine. And as Sam mentioned, very quickly, they realized they were hearing very different things than they understood previously about the diseases as they took each one by one, and specifically out of the context of a specific product decision. So that was really a different setting for them to talk about a particular disease. We'll just talk about PKU. In the past, they were only thinking about it when they were considering whether to approve Kuvan or whether to approve Palynziq or, some other treatment. And now they were hearing kind of what it's like day to day for people living with this disease and, having to make treatment and management decisions for PKU every minute of every day. So that was just a whole big aha awareness opportunity for them. And that's why they made all of the additions to this program that Sam described. So some of the big kind of key points are, first, they really bought into the credibility and the validity of the patient's expertise. That was not something they were sort of sold on at the beginning, I'll be quite honest. And that patients and caregivers and families have a role in contributing to kind of the evidence that they look at when they, make these decisions as being very unique and important. So that was huge. I mean, it was just, I can't tell you what a different way of thinking that was for them. And as Sam showed in that chart, prior to this PFDD initiative, there was really very limited opportunity for patient input. They were only getting that at the tail end, and if clinical trials weren't enrolling or the endpoints, the outcomes that they were looking for weren't really relevant to patient experience, they weren't finding out until 10 years down the road and $1 billion invested. And for the life science companies, that was a huge missed opportunity. And so they created this meeting series as a way to have more systematic input so that when we bring the PKU community together, it's in a very similar format and structure as when the Angelman community, in fact, met yesterday for their EL-PFDD meeting. And there's sort of an expected way that these meetings will unfold that gives the reviewers a little bit more ability to, absorb them and use the information in kind of a similar way, no matter what the disease state is that each meeting is focused on. So again, I just can't reinforce enough how much these meetings really deepened the appreciation for the expertise that each of you as PKU community members has. And when we talk about somebody living with PKU, that's the diagnosed individual, and the caregiver for a person with PKU, maybe you're the person who mixes the formula every morning and make sure that the medical foods are ordered, and maybe you're just the person who helped somebody get back into care after a number of years of not managing PKU. So we use that term caregiver to reflect a lot of different roles and ways in which you might be supporting or helping your loved one live the best life possible with PKU. And all of those perspectives are really important, and we're really glad to be able to showcase and share them when we come together on May 8th. Another thing that FDA really quickly learned, and as I said, I was involved with this meeting series from the very beginning, and I can remember chatting with FDA folks after, I think it was the third meeting, and they were already having this moment of almost disbelief. And I circled in yellow here, what they were hearing from patients was so different from what they were hearing from drug sponsors about, the drug benefit, which is, what are you trying to change? What symptom are you trying to alleviate? What aspect of the disease is this medicine intended to act on? And that what patients wanted and what sponsors were working on were just not really matching up. and they couldn't believe it. They were like, this is a disaster. So that's why they created this channel for patient perspectives to be available no matter whether a drug is in the very earliest stages, which is the best time to make kind of the correction, rather than waiting until the end and, all those clinical trials that have gone forward and then come to something that, the patients don't really want. So we're, aware that there are new therapies in development for PKU, some of which are at that very early stage, and others of which, might be hopeful for approvals, in the near term. So we have the opportunity to inform kind of all of the decision making around that. And here I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to share with you. Oh, maybe not yet. No, I'm wrong. Got ahead of myself. So thinking about kind of more of the impact of PFDD meetings, as I said, we've got the opportunity to inform FDA and other regulators, researchers and clinicians, and they kind of really come into play on the far left side of that graph that Sam showed you and the far right side once a medicine is approved, helping in shared decision-making about whether that's the right medicine for me as a patient. And then the life science companies that are developing these medicines, and really, it's in their interest to have something that is going to align with what patients expect in terms of benefits and are also willing to live with in terms of side effects or, other downsides of a treatment, and knowing kind of where the different trade-offs land is a really important thing to them. If we look at kind of some of the past meetings to give you an idea of, what might happen after the TruePKU meeting. We worked with the atopic dermatitis or eczema community back in 2019 on an EL-PFDD meeting. And at that point, there weren't many therapies available for eczema that were not kind of steroid creams that you rubbed on your skin. And those can be pretty rough on people over time. They have a lot of risks of, repeated use. And also when you think of something like eczema, and it's a very common disease, maybe some of the folks that are with us today have experience with eczema, you kind of think of, a red rash on your skin and it's annoying, but it's not serious. And so that was sort of the mindset, and a mindset that the community lived with too, of not being taken seriously or not being really considered for all the ways in which, having chronic eczema might affect your life. So in that meeting, we used a lot of visuals because often people with eczema hide or cover up, or, they don't go out when they're having a big flare, as the two individuals, the child and the woman here on the left do. One of the other things, eczema is often lifelong, starting right after birth. And we showed through a survey that the impact on the caregiver taking care of children was the same as an adult patient with eczema, and that huge caregiver burden was totally being overlooked in terms of the impact of the disease. And as you might expect, itch was one of the top 3 most problematic symptoms. And we really dug into that to help unpack what having chronic itch might mean in your life. And I'll show that on the next slide. But first, go back one just for a second. There was sort of a lot of expectation that patients were satisfied and okay with what they had to treat their eczema. But we demonstrated that 89% of caregivers were really finding limited effectiveness of what they had available to them at that time. So in terms of unpacking this idea of itch, now we're ready to go to the next one. We kind of tied together a lot of things that came forward during the meeting and showing, what itch can do, and kind of the first level impacts of that were the scratching, the open sores that it caused, and, not getting good rest because you're awake, kind of uncomfortable and itching all night long. And then the next being shame and the bloodstained clothing and irritated skin and a difficulty with attention and mood that can come, and all of these things sort of intertwine, going all the way out to the high levels of depression and anxiety that patients with eczema reported. And that was, a whole different dimension of itch than you might think about when you hear that word for the first time. So that was really important for the FDA and for drug developers to understand about the impact of eczema on people's lives. So that's kind of a thematic, outcome of these meetings. And if we look more at sort of the hardcore, like how does it change the treatment for a community? I know this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'm going to start on the bottom right and show you kind of tied to that eczema example. When we had this meeting in 2019, as I said, most of the treatments for eczema were creams you rubbed on your skin. And in the years pretty closely following that, the FDA approved several new therapies that included biologics, which are injectable medicines, things you take by pill, and a whole different way of treating eczema. And that was kind of a new thing for the community to have to absorb too. They were thinking, well, this is happening on my skin. How is taking a pill going to change, my life? And it's been really transformative for people living with moderate and severe eczema, and has totally transformed that disease space in terms of research and where things are heading now. And that's not, of course, due simply to the PFDD meeting, but it was a big catalyst in helping the FDA understand that patients were willing to accept a little more risk than they would have thought kind of on the surface, but also encouraging sponsors to really target areas of living with eczema that they might not have previously counted as being as important. Kind of moving up from the eczema, I'll talk next about treatment-resistant depression, and we worked on this meeting, which happened in 2018. At the time, there were 29 medications to treat depression, kind of used in a pretty haphazard way. But after you didn't improve with using 2 or more antidepressants, you were considered treatment-resistant depression. So we focused the meeting on that group of people and really helped FDA understand that they were really seeking something that wasn't available on the market. Many of them had been on, 10 or more different medications in different combinations. And it helped the FDA to make the decision to approve Spravato, which is a nasal spray version of ketamine, which is actually a street drug and getting a lot of attention these days. But in this format, it has been very useful in treating people who've kind of gone through, multiple medications for their depression, and really providing some very exciting results for people who've really been through the mill in more typical treatments. We've also been involved in a couple of meetings for sleep disorders. The narcolepsy meeting was actually one of the FDA-led meetings, but it was the first rare disease that the FDA focused on. And at the time, the medication for narcolepsy, the only one that was approved at the time, is a sodium oxybate. And sodium you might recognize as salt, and a very high salt content in that medication. And one of the things that came out of that meeting was how many people were, not able to even access that medication because they had cardiac issues or some other health concern, and the sodium level was just too high. So that company went back and actually created a reformulation, excuse me, of that medication that was a lower sodium version. Also, what came to light there was the need for this particular Xywav, as you see in the picture there, is a medication you have to wake up in the middle of the night to take, which is kind of counterintuitive for a sleep disorder, that you have to wake up in the middle of the night every night to take your medication. And another company, they heard at the meeting how inconvenient that was, how problematic that was. And another company developed an extended release version that you could take once nightly and then sleep through the night. So both of those big advances for the narcolepsy community. And in sleep apnea, another very common condition you may have some awareness of, sleep apnea was completely judged by the number of times you would stop breathing during sleep, and all the focus on research and everything about patient experience was focused on how many times you would wake up in the middle of the night because you weren't breathing. And what came forward in that meeting that led to the approval of this drug Sunosi was that people were having daytime sleepiness because they weren't sleeping well at night and they were having trouble during the day. To stay, excuse me, allergies really got me today. People were having trouble staying awake during the day, which was causing, car accidents and, other things when you've got a lot of heavy load of daytime sleepiness. So another company did the work to commercialize a product to treat daytime sleepiness in sleep apnea. And then the last example is from CTX, an inborn error of metabolism, cerebrotendinous xanthomatosis. And we worked on that meeting in 2021. And at the time, there was no therapy approved for CTX. And there was the off-label use of a medication called Chenodal that had been approved years earlier for a gallstone issue, and patients were accessing that in an off-label version, but often running into problems with insurance coverage for it. And it was one of those medications that had really, the cost of it had ratcheted up quite high over the years, and people were really finding it difficult to access the medication, and there was nothing else available to them. Although access issues aren't generally part of these PFDD meetings, it did help the FDA understand why it was so important to do clinical trials, and they worked with the company that wanted to get an indication, it's called, for CTX for this medicine, to work on the clinical trial design so that the trial would be easier to enroll patients. And obviously, if you've got access to a medicine that you can purchase, it's harder to do a clinical trial on the medicine because there's not really much incentive to put yourself through all of the rigors of clinical trials. But that worked out to be a new approval that just came in 2024, I think, at the end of last year, specific for CTX. And one other thing we wanted to just bring to your attention is in addition to kind of a new product that might get approved as a result of the FDA better understanding what patients are finding most important and what trade-offs they're willing to make, are some of the rules that can surround different medications and the way they're dispensed, and what, you might have to have certain tests and keep up with different monitoring for some of the medicines that have maybe a few more side effects. And we didn't work with the schizophrenia community on this one, but this is an example that's quite recent, so we wanted to bring it to your attention. So in schizophrenia, they did a EL-PFDD meeting in November of 2022. And you can see in the darker text here, one of the things that came up in that meeting was how the rules around this drug clozapine were making it really difficult for people with schizophrenia to access it. They had to go through very rigorous blood tests every time they got their prescriptions refilled. And that was just a barrier because of the lack of access that many people with schizophrenia have to healthcare. And so FDA really took that on board, and they had a number of meetings to convene to see, are there ways that they can monitor the health of people without it being such a barrier? And just about 6 weeks ago, they removed the restriction around the blood tests that patients were having to go through. So hopefully this opens, a wider channel for people to benefit from that particular therapy that would not probably have come about without the EL-PFDD meeting. Okay, and with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Lauren to share a bit about how the TruePKU EL-PFDD meeting is structured and all the ways in which we'd love for you to be actively engaged and participating in that meeting a month from now. Lauren, over to you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So if you are here today, you likely know that on the NPKUA website, there is a TruePKU webpage, and that is exactly where you will log on a month from today to access our live stream. It is free and happening completely virtually. There will be a way for you to pull that up on YouTube, and perhaps if you have a smart TV, to cache that onto your TV for more easier watching, but it will be easily accessible on that webpage. And the meeting is 5 hours long. So we will, you're not obligated to kind of tune in for those full 5 hours. It will be recorded, but it will happen from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern on May 8th. So I'm going to kind of dive in and give you a little bit of a sense of the agenda and what everything we've talked about so far, how that kind of folds in for the PKU community. So here is a little high-level look at our agenda. So we are really structuring that patient perspective and the lived experience of PKU in 3 different topic areas. So symptoms and daily impacts, so what it's like to live day-to-day with PKU. We'll cover different treatment options and what's working, what's not for different folks. And then ending off looking more aspirationally to monitoring, treatment aspirations, and clinical trials. So giving a sense of what the community hopes for the future. And to start off with, we will hear from a member of the FDA to kind of kick off the meeting and showcase that importance of what it means to the FDA to hear about this topic from you all. And then we'll have a familiar face come in and give a little bit of a clinical overview and a scope of the current treatments for PKU. So you may recognize Dr. Carey Harding. He will be giving a little bit of a presentation to kick us off for the day at the start of the meeting. And so you'll see here, there are kind of subgroups within each of these boxes for our topics for the meeting. And this is how we are hoping to layer in that patient perspective in each of these topic areas. So at the start of each section, we will have a panel of patients and caregivers giving a pre-recorded session. It's going to look a little bit like this, with someone in front of a camera offering their testimonial to us about their lived experience unique to them for PKU, or as a caregiver for what their loved one and their own experience has been like. So we may, in that section, some folks may bring in a video of them trying their first hamburger after successful treatment, or what their formula regimen looks like. And so we hope for it to be really dynamic session and also really showcasing the broad depth of all of the different experiences of what it is like to live with PKU. Next, to follow up with that, we will have a live Zoom panel looking just like this, but with Catherine and Kim at the center, really moderating a discussion from several folks, usually about 4 to 5 members of the PKU community reacting to those videos that they just saw, but also having a discussion about what's come up in the phone calls and answering to live comments that are coming in as well. So it will be a very dynamic discussion, and it'll be moderated. So we hope to touch on a lot of the things that you all hope to share and that come out of those videos and come out of the lived experience of the panelists here. So you'll get to hopefully see a really broad array of experiences with PKU through this meeting. So that will be replicated in each of the 3 topic areas, that same kind of structure. So it should be a really great day. All right, and just to give you a sense of who will be attending from kind of biggest audience down to the smallest, we anticipate that there will be a lot of folks kind of tuning in on listening mode. So that is everyone from those FDA reviewers and their staff, also with some other people from different relevant federal agencies, to our sponsors for the meeting and other life science companies participating, down to researchers, academics, healthcare professionals wanting to learn a little bit more about PKU, and this could be some of their first exposure to the community. So that is going to be really important for them to see and hear, along with other communities who are interested in hosting a meeting like this. So it'll be great to give that exposure of what PKU is like to that audience. Then we'll have our live community participants, and those are those discussion starters, those folks on Zoom who will be joining in to kind of kick off our conversation, along with perhaps you all. So those who are calling in by phone or submitting written comments to kind of be discussed and kicked around during the meeting as well. And then we'll have some opportunity for that pre-recorded testimony. That's a smaller group. And we've been working with some of those folks to help record their video and narrow down their story into a way that addresses those questions that the FDA has for us to cover during the meeting. Down to our moderators. So Kim and Catherine will be helping keep the meeting going. We'll be facilitating that discussion and helping us bring in those written comments that we have talked about. So just to give you a sense of who's going to be in attendance on May 8th. And this is where this kind of middle section is where we are hoping that the lived experience with PKU comes through from both the folks living with the condition and then their caregivers. So these are places where you all can kind of participate in the day. And to do that, if you have not been in touch with us already, never fear. There is still plenty of time and ways that you can have your voice heard on May 8th. The first is by that comment form that is currently living on the TruePKU webpage. So if you had not already responded to that comment form, there are a series of questions and comments that we ask folks to respond to give their insight on about what is most important in the future of PKU treatment and what it's like to live with it now. So if you haven't already done so, we encourage you to go ahead and fill out that form. And some of those comments from that form will be addressed during the meeting and brought up during the meeting. Underneath where the live stream will be on May 8th, there's also going to be a comment box. And so you'll be able to submit comments live during the meeting about what you're hearing or what you kind of want to contribute from your own experience or your family's experience on that day too. So there will be a way for you to do that on May 8th as well. And then just kind of like a telethon on the live stream, there will be a phone number for you to call in live to the meeting to share more of a longer narrative or question or comment that you have about PKU too. So still plenty of time to participate, and we will really try to cover as much as we can and bring in as many of those comments and calls as we can during the day. And those that we don't get to will be, and those also that we do will be covered in our voice of the patient report that you saw earlier, that kind of eczema example and the schizophrenia example. That will this will all kind of culminate with that voice of the patient report into a tangible evergreen document that lives on. And that is a big way that we will be pulling in some of these comments and calls and feedback from the meeting as well. So still very important. We still want you all to participate in a really big way on May 8th. And these are the different topic areas that the FDA has asked us to address. So earlier on, Sam showed all of those different centers of the FDA that are kind of contribute to or studying PKU. And we have a really rare opportunity where we have a lot of centers, more than usual, being featured in this meeting. And so they have given us a series of questions that they want to hear more about from the lived experience of PKU. So you'll see these here. And this is really what we hope for you all as you're submitting comments and calling in the topic areas that we would love for you to touch on in your own testimony or comments. So this is kind of the lane that we are staying in and working towards for the meeting as well. Just given that 5 hours is kind of a short time to expose everyone to the lived experience of PKU, there are some topics that we won't be able to cover during TruePKU. And the nature of EL-PFDD meetings is that they really focus on what is under the purview of the FDA. So we are going to be kind of doing our best to align the experience of those topic areas into this meeting. And there's some things that we are just not able to cover just due to the nature of EL-PFDD meetings. But we do want to assert that it doesn't signify that they're not important topics, and know that NPKUA is advocating for those in different ways. So just know that you may not see these topics covered in depth during the meeting, but there will be other ways that NPKUA is integrating them into their work going forward as well. So I will go ahead and turn it back to Kim and our team, and we're happy to address your questions in the chat or the Q&A session that you might have. So feel free if there's anything on your mind that you want clarity about, or want us to describe, or that you're curious about, we're happy to address those now too.
Lauren, that was terrific and makes me really excited for the time we'll spend together with this community on May 8th. Just thinking about, this opportunity, knowing we've got 4 centers of the FDA, which is the first time 4 centers of the FDA have come together on one of these meetings. And also, given the number of questions that they posed, they allowed us to extend the meeting length. Is usually 4 hours, and they allowed us to have 5 hours. And that gave us the opportunity to also include more speakers than we usually will have at one of these meetings. And so therefore more first-hand experiences to weave into the conversation. And we have confirmed speakers as young as 9 years old and as old as 59 years old with lived experience. So we're really excited to show the breadth and depth, and of course, caregivers of people even younger than 9 in the mix too. And Sam, I don't know if we've had any questions come through or not.
Well, I think it would be helpful if you could just touch on kind of how people can maybe take a look back at some of this information if they want to, and just sort of prepare for May 8th.
Great segue. So this webinar is being recorded, and that will go up on the NPKUA's YouTube page. So you'll be able to reference it. We'll also put a link to it on the TruePKU page once it's uploaded to YouTube. And so you'll be able to reference this particular webinar. All of the questions that the FDA has asked us to address are on the TruePKU webpage on NPKUA's site. And there's also kind of a frequently asked questions set of drop downs that has a lot of very helpful information in terms of preparing and how these meetings work, and what to expect. Anything you think I've overlooked in that response?
No, I don't think so. We'll have kind of the agenda going live in the next couple of weeks as well, that we'll share via a meeting program. So you'll have as much information as we can provide, hopefully. But I know the NPKUA team is here and available for questions following this as well. And I think there's a specific contact for TruePKU on the TruePKU website, but other ways to contact them as well.
Catherine, anything you'd like to add from the NPKUA perspective?
I don't think so. I think if we just go to the next slide, yeah, that one. I want to say thank you, of course, to, our partners at Kith, but we could not put this meeting on without our community partners. So on the screen now, these are other organizations that work within the PKU space who have supported this meeting. So a big thank you to all of these partners. And not to rush through them, but we do have, I think we have a slide though, also thanking our sponsors who have provided unrestricted educational grants to support the TruePKU initiative. So it really is the full community coming together. And we look forward to May 8th. As Sam, Kim, and Lauren said, if there are any questions in the meantime, the NPKUA staff is available. Feel free to reach out to us. And thank you to each of you for helping make this meeting a success as well. So I think that's it. All right.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you again on May 8th.
Perfect.
Bye, everyone.